Hello and welcome to Incorruptible Mass. Our mission here is to help us all transform state politics because we know that we could have a state that truly represents the needs of the 7 million fabulous people who live here, and that is our goal. So today we are going to talk about Zohran Mamdani, who won as is a Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City, and how that intersects with the state of democracy today, including the big bork of a bill, whatever we're calling that thing, that Trump is passing this week. The Democrats and how they are reacting to the entire second win of Trump. We'll talk about Zohran and Brad Lander and, the dynamics of that race, and basically where we think the state of democracy is going here in America. So before we do, I will have my two illustrious co-hosts introduce themselves, and I will start with Jordan.
Jordan Burke Powers, he, him. And we are, I'm here in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we are talking on July 4th. And I always think about what my grandfather would say about the history of America, which is that we learn the history of America as a bunch of rich white men who like the history of that. But he's like, that's not the history of America. The history of America is our history, what we did. He's like, we did all the things, regular people did all the things. And he's like, the story of America is a bunch of white old men being in the way of America and a bunch of the rest of us fixing.
Yeah.
And so that is what I want to bring in the energy into today is, welcome, congratulations to all the people who spent, and generations of people who did all the hard work.
Right on. Love it. And Jonathan.
Jonathan Cohen, he, him, his, been active in progressive issue and electoral campaigns for over a decade. Now here in Massachusetts, joining from the South End. For doing July 4th riffs, to begin, I will just add one piece that I particularly liked the other day, which was in WBUR about Catherine Lee Bates, who is the author of the song America the Beautiful, because she was an anti-imperialist social reformer from the era who wrote the song as largely being that type of like, you're not living up to what you're supposed to dimension, kind of line of let's say left criticism in U.S. history, and that like would have probably have sued by Trump using it as a if she were alive today.
Amazing. I am Anna Callahan, she, her, coming at you from Medford, where I'm a city councilor, and love looking at local politics and how that can be a powerful way to change things in national politics and of course state politics. Wow, what can I say about July 4th? I'm sad I'm not gonna see any fireworks this year. I love fireworks. They're so
good. The technology is amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. They came before guns. That's what that stuff is supposed to be used for, is beauty.
Oh, amen. Amen.
So I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about today. I'm always excited to talk about democracy, always excited to talk about a progressive win. And so I am going to mostly kick this off to Jonathan to tell us a little bit about Zohran Mamdani and his win, his surprise, like amazingly strong win in the Democratic primary for New York mayor.
Awesome. So as folks who listen to this podcast probably well know, New York City recently held its Democratic primary for the mayoral election, which I feel like a lot of people had approached that race viewing it as a depressing foregone conclusion that Andrew Cuomo, sex pest former governor of New York State,
who probably murdered like many seniors,
exactly,
putting them into COVID, infested nursing homes.
Exactly, who covered up the deaths of people in nursing homes, constantly like tried to work to keep Republicans in power in Albany.
Great choice, for Democrats.
Exactly, somebody who like sued to get like the gynecological records of the accusers, like in court, like just a terrible human being, bad policy. But because of the money and a disgusting amount of outside money and universal name recognition, was expected to be like an odds-on favorite. So like, what was particularly exciting to me with Zohran's win is I love it when good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And it was a great like merger of those two.
Oh, yeah.
because like I was happy to see Andrew Cuomo lose. Like we can relish in the defeat of our like the defeat of our enemies in politics. And then also inspiring to see a campaign that was like had a lot of positive campaigning, did a lot of work to turn out young voters.
It was
That
amazing that
campaign
young
really
voter
did.
turnout.
Yeah, because we had like the data from the Times that showed like how much higher rates kind of millennials. And I'll shout out from millennials, the original version of the graph showed this like giant surge of like the 18-year-olds, which was actually like revised to be like not quite accurate, but it was really the like upper 20s to 30s. Shout out the millennial generation. Uh,
Yeah.
I was like, millennials stay winning. That. Uh, but was something that was really exciting to see because of how often, like how rare it is where like a surge in turnout really is coming from young voters, and how often when that does happen, it helps to elect more progressive candidates running for office. For him to really do have a successful effort of doing really well in a lot of New York's immigrant communities, and then doing well with the base of young voters in the city, as well as running a campaign, trying to highlight kind of like with a big but workable ideas focused on improving the experience of living in the city for voters. One thing that I had noted during our, say, pre-show chatter that I thought was particularly kind of interesting to see. It's always fascinating when if you're phone banking for a campaign or canvassing to see what is the script that they're using, because that's the distillation of the message they want to get across for people. In his campaign's messaging for like their phone bank script was very clearly combining that kind of basic economic message around kind of affordability, of talking about freezing the rent, of building more affordable housing, of free childcare, and combining that of like we will to kind of make sure that New York City is more affordable for you, by investment and cracking down on bad actors. Well, and we will make sure that we're fighting against Donald Trump to protect New York City. And because I think that there's often a tension that can exist in like democratic discourse of like to what extent that the way forward is just this like very narrow focus on economic messaging, or whether there should be a lot of Trump, let's say, positioning against Trump and everything that he stands for.
But not strong economic messaging, right? Like
Exactly. It's typically like small bore economic messaging.
boring.
Where like
Nothing.
everybody who always says that we should stop focusing on identity issues and start focusing on economic issues, and their response is always a set of tax incentives for small businesses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like always somehow, and like they're always somehow the people who oppose any good policy. And this was in fact seeing like strong progressive economic policy that really gets the what that sense of like people being gouged on so many ways, in that kind of clear messaging against the Trump administration, which I think really is what Democrats need. And that although you
different from, I would say different from the normal Democrat thing, which is like, look how bad he is. I'm not.
Yeah.
Which is very different from like, I will fight against what he is doing to you.
Exactly. Where like people want to see people willing to fight. Both fight for things and against things.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just, I'm not that. But I'm actually.
Do you remember the time years ago where the DCCC actually had a bumper sticker that said "Not a Republican"?
Yes. Yeah. Which is a good distillation of their beliefs.
And Jordan, I know you were a little disappointed that it wasn't Brad Lander because you've
yeah. So I'll just say I'm excited about the Mamdani for all the reasons that we're going to discuss. But I tell people like I was personally a little sad that Brad Lander isn't going to be the next mayor, because I happen to know that he's a progressive in good standing. I know him from the before times.
Yeah.
He didn't just come like when people are like, oh, like he got arrested, he did these things. Like he's been doing these things for years to years.
And expound on that for people who don't know. He was trying to defend some people. Where exactly was it? It was in a court.
In an immigration court, and he was escorting them out so that they could leave, because ICE is detaining people, I would say illegally, but certainly within some areas of the law, who are going through the immigration process so that they can't
doing what they're supposed to do.
Right. And so he was walking them out as a person of the court, right? Lawyers can be in the thing, representing people. And he was arrested for doing that. But he doesn't come to that activism just like because he's running for office or because he was in office. Like he's been there for a long time. He has been somebody who's dedicated to sort of progressive change. So I tell people, like, I know him before and the before times as a great progressive activist, and then I also know him as a really good Jewish progressive activist. He's the comptroller, which is like the treasurer for the city of New York. And I tell people, like, well, listen, like, we went through a process. I supported the reform movement in decarbonizing their, or at least pushing to decarbonize their assets, their sort of the money that they have invested as a movement. And we had people come and they're like, hemming and hawing. And Brad Lander was like, we did that for the city of, he was unapologetic. Like, voters voted to have our pensions be decarbonized, and we actually enacted it. And then he spent an hour getting into the weeds, like a total technocrat, about how they actually did that, what they could do, what they couldn't do, where were the limits, and how they're legally required to make money, so they got sued, and how he was just like unapologetically like, we won that fight because it's better for your pocketbooks, right? Like, just like unapologetically a progressive in every way, and willing to fight. It's also willing to fight, but a technocrat. Like, he's just this old technocrat. So anyway, so I'm of course excited. Like, I don't want people to be like, oh, Jordan wasn't excited. I was excited. I just have to know Brad Lander and
Yeah.
before,
Well,
and I knew it because of this progressive work. And I knew so that was
like with local progress too.
Yep, local progress, right?
Yep.
Like, he's just one of those guys who's been around doing good life.
And as a Bernie person, here now it's summer, I could show off my Bernie tattoo again. As a Bernie person, having receipts. I mean, this is what I think, Jordan, you were saying this beforehand. This is what people loved about Bernie. Is the guy had like 35 years of receipts.
Yeah.
Being somebody who stands for these things. And like the difference between Zohran, who is relatively new, not that he's new, but he's relatively new, and Brad Lander, who has been around for longer and has more receipts. So I totally get that. And I was just going to comment that the thing I'm excited about Zohran. I've heard him now. And we all are. We all are very excited about him. I've heard him speak a number of times. I think he is truly incredibly well-spoken and able to answer unbelievably difficult gotcha questions in a way that like really reframes things.
Yeah.
He's amazing. But to me, what was most exciting is not actually Zohran. We'll see on Zohran. What was most exciting was that the voters of New York chose someone who basically was unrelenting about economic policy and how he was going to make it more affordable. He was going to freeze the rent. He is going to have free buses. He's going to provide things. He's going to use the public dollars. He's going to tax the rich and use the public dollars to provide services for people who, are not wealthy. God forbid. And I was just proud of the people in New York for choosing that over the, giant name recognition and like tens of millions of dollars of outside funding. I was like, this is a really good sign.
And it was a pleasant surprise to see him also win on the first ballot, because it had been like one of the things that was particularly heartening about like the Brad Lander, Zohran Mamdani, like kind of cross endorsement was of how.
And by the way, let's take a step back. New York City has ranked choice voting, which means in the Democratic Party, which means, and probably most of our listeners know, but I just want to back up a little bit. Ranked choice voting, you vote for your first choice, your second choice, your third choice. And if your third choice doesn't win, then their votes go to your, your next, or sorry, if your first choice doesn't win, then those votes go to your second choice. And so it was expected that either Cuomo would win on the first ballot, the first choice, right? The first run of ballots, or that like slowly over time, Mamdani might catch up to him through people not winning. And then there's votes going to Mamdani and people not winning and those votes going to Mamdani. So sorry to interrupt you, Jonathan, but like.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Where like, and it was nice to see the way in which the ranked choice system one did what people say that it does in terms of creating that kind of constructive collegial aspect between candidates. Because I thought that their cross endorsement led to a lot of great digital content.
And did we say that out loud? Mamdani and Brad Lander, they endorsed each other.
Exactly.
They spoke together. They went on Colbert and sat together and said, no, I think he's wonderful. They introduced each other as like the most amazing.
And the other candidates down the Working Families Party had other ranked. So if you were like, I don't like either of them, but this other candidate speaks to me, they were saying that's fine because that's what ranked does. Then make them your third and fourth choice. Like make them like, hey, if you have other preferences, because there was a bunch of people ranked. It was just like, don't rank Cuomo.
Exactly. Yeah, because they had their
voting.
and it's like it was really nice to see that and like to the point that there was I know like the American Prospect noted that there's kind of chatter that Brad Lander would become like one of the like a deputy mayor in the Mamdani administration, which I think is a great pairing for the two. But one thing that I thought would also note that I thought was really interesting when it comes to some of that expectation that Cuomo would win that came out of a lot of polling and general public perception is that it was interesting to read the kind of like the, I guess, memo from Public Policy Polling, which was the only firm that actually had, let's say, Mamdani beating Cuomo in their poll. And what they had noted, because they had actually been polling for a candidate in the comptroller race, not even the mayoral, but that they had made a point of if people say that they are voting, believe them that when they say that they are voting. Rather than the typical, like, if people say that they're voting and they don't have a history of that, we don't believe you. Because they believe people because if there were a lot of young people, like a lot of younger voters, let's say like 18 to 35 crowd, which I've unfortunately aged out of a few years ago, a couple of years ago. Now, then you have young voters, if they haven't actually don't have that great of a voting history, but they say that they're voting, believe them. And the results did show that that was what happened.
Nice. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else, Jordan or Jonathan, that you want to say about
just that I think
potentially
the system, ranked voting worked. That's the way it should work. It works. It doesn't mean that there won't, they always make these promises that like people, they won't fight. And that's democracy. Democracy should be people calling each other out and saying that this other person's not going to be good. And then people get to decide. But the great thing is that this gives people the ability to both have their first choice, so be heard on who they want, but allow the system to work itself out so that ultimately their choice that they're okay with still becomes the elected official. And so this is like, and so this, that cross thing. And then what you have then is you have so if you, like myself, love the fact that Brad Lander's this like technocratic progressive who understands that expertise is going to go in. Whereas if they were at each other, maybe it doesn't go into them, right? So you're going to get the way in which Mamdani inspires people, his intelligence, the way that he's able to sort of cross ethnic groups and speak to people on their core. He's really he's gifted in the thing that's what you want a mayor to do. Yeah. And it's some of those technocratic things that I also love, right? So you get both of those in the administration.
It's also one thing that's also I think is really nice is how it changes the way that you're campaigning. Because if you know that like what you could tell from polling, that you could tell that at the end of the day, every poll showed that it's coming down to Cuomo and Mamdani. And if you're talking to a voter who just like their top choice is one of the other candidates, like you don't need to suddenly start being like, actually, like you don't need to be like, your candidate doesn't have a chance of winning. Vote for mine instead. You could be like, you know what? There are many great things about that candidate. Get it? Like, I would like you to rank my candidate above the other person who I think might win. So like we're talking to people like, I remember when I was phone banking and I had somebody who had been supporting Zohran, was thinking of voting, but I'm like, hey, I wasn't sure which ranking he would put the two of them. And I was like, you know what? I'm happy Zohran first, considering that all of the rounds I've seen of voting put it as Zohran and Cuomo at the final ballot. The other one, that's still helping beat Cuomo. My goal is for you to not have Cuomo on your ballot, to have Zohran appear on your ballot. And like, so it felt nice to be in a conversation when you didn't need to be antagonistic to somebody about that because you know that the vote still helps the outcome.
Amazing. So I want to pivot us a little bit because this is we're talking about Zohran to get to the state of democracy, and I want us to juxtapose a little positive pocket in one city in America with what is happening probably today, July 4th, and has been happening all week at the national level, where Trump's, I don't know what to call this thing because I cannot use the word beautiful about it. It's just like so horrible, like belligerent, the big belligerent
bill I've seen.
Horrible. Oh my God. So his bill, which they're going to pass, and it's like, wow.
It already passed.
Yeah.
It passed. So he just has to sign.
Sorry to Lisa Murkowski that the House didn't make the changes. They're trying to make, as they never were going to.
I think I just want to say the bill itself is atrocious, and we should talk about it in a second. But I want to talk a little bit about the democracy as a whole. And I just want to say that America is a failing state. Like, I just think we need to get this in our kishkas that like we're in a really bad place, and it's not Trump is a big part of that, but our Supreme Court is also a big part of it. Like the things that they're ruling is atrocious. And with all due respect to Ketanji, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown, where she warns like more of these will like be, I was like, girl, we're there. Like we are there. Yeah. Like these decisions are like, I think she's trying to warn her colleagues, like she is speaking to them to be like, stop going down this path. So I'm not actually criticizing her, to be clear, but like we're there. Like it is, and I, people keep talking like, oh, like this is like if this thing happens, it will be bad. But like all those things have like we're crossing Rubicon after Rubicon after Rubicon. Like it wasn't even, Trump was impeached for withholding aid that was appropriated by Congress to Zelensky in a phone call. He straight up just did that the other day out in the open to Israel and said, if you don't drop charges against Bibi Netanyahu, then Israel's not going to get aid. And like that wasn't even news. Like that's the reason he was impeached.
Yeah,
just like he's so like we're so lawless now that he's just straight up doing things that are just like bonkers town. Like like it's barely a blip that he's saying Americans are gonna get sent to concentrate. That we built concentration camps. Right? Like, yes, America's had a history of people are like, whoa, America's did it before, but never for good. It's never good.
Right. That has not been a good step at any point. Yeah. I mean, we also had slavery. That wasn't good.
Right. I mean, they're all sides that were fair. Those are bad things. Those are really bad. And to go backwards is it's not like, oh, America's going back. Like, that's just who we are. No. We have fought those battles. And we've moved on. And the fact that we're going back is bad. That's
as
bad.
Well as the fact that I would even underscore that one of the things that stands out a lot with the Trump administration is that if you take all of the terrible parts of the U.S. history that often people can try to hide about U.S. history, and he's like, actually, these are great, and we're doing them again. So that there's a kind of a pride in doing them. There's a bragging about doing them, so that it's not the terrible thing that you try to hide under the rug. They're like, we're doing it. We're gonna blast it everywhere that we're gonna do it, and we're gonna say, try and stop us.
But I think the other thing that is new, the thing that's new, that the reason I would say we're now in a failing state, we're now in a problematic place, is we've never had all three branches create a dictatorship. And that is actually new. Like, yes, Lincoln's suspended habeas corpus, but that also but the Supreme Court was like, you can't do that. Like, there were other branches pushing back on those on overreaches by the executive. There were moments where we had a strong executive where Congress was like, no, you cannot do that. We're going to do things to rein you in, right? Like, it's not that it's ever been perfect or it's ever been like we're just like a functioning full-fledged but those push and pulls were happening. We're having no push and pull. Like there is the thing, we are in a state where there is one party acting like the early part of the Hitler Weimar or any other, or Hungary or Erdogan in Turkey. Like these are all uni parties where one person is the person, and the courts, the judiciary, and the media, which is
thank you. State, I was hoping you would bring in the media.
The New York Times wanted, because they were worried about their failing, their failing numbers, they wanted Trump elected, and they got what they wanted. And their coverage reflects somebody who believes that they need Trump to survive. And
also, let's not forget that Trump is actively suing NBC, CBS, he's actively suing a bunch of them, and they are going to lose crap tons of money in these lawsuits. And so now they cannot speak out against him for financial purposes. Like they won't be able to. And like, how is the media supposed
to? We have all of these meetings. Yeah. And I think because, we said this before on a different podcast, that like, because it's not like dark out and like there's not like water coming down and eerie music playing outside all the time, that we can't grasp where we are. But I want to, like, this 4th of July, like, we need to grasp where we are. This is we're in a new territory that's real bad.
And I think
real bad.
One thing about kind of the moment that I think it has continued. Something that's continued to get worse. Is I remember there was one analysis of one of the things that will always be like a critical part of democracy, like collapsing, is when the center right abandons the concept of democracy itself, which I think is very clear in a lot of like throughout the Republican Party, and like that's like really, if you go through a number of the historical examples, that typically ends up happening is once that kind of representation of your kind of the avatar of your conservative elites realize that they don't actually care anymore about it. Like I feel like all of like the big tech titans being with Trump in his inauguration is a great visual representation of it. That's very hard because of what that says about the institutions themselves.
And I would actually make an argument that, and I often talk about this, that I think that people who don't vote, right? People like those non-voters who voted for Trump, it is my suspicion that they actually are people who get it more than the voters, because what they understand is that we already did not live in a democracy before Trump. And so they, again, also, when you say like the conservative sort of middle of the Republican Party, and you're talking about the elites, I want to talk about the more, lower class, the working class people who they are voting for Trump, not because they think that it's democratic and they get to choose or whatever, but like they have a fundamental belief that we're not in democracy anyway. So like, let's just have a bully and a strong man who's going to like squash those other guys, because at least then maybe I'll get something. And this, deep belief, like underlying not just the elites who have shit tons of money and want to rule everything, but the underlying belief of people that, as Michael Moore said, really what they wanted was a Molotov cocktail. They don't think that it's going to fix democracy. They think they'll just blow shit up. And that to me is, again, like our deeply failing democracy, when people don't believe that it functions anymore.
I mean, I guess I'll say yes. And also white people have always proven to vote for people of color if they believe that it will, like, one of the things I say all the time is like, we know from a lot of studies that like when white people find out that black people get access to something, their support for that government agency falls down. But like, do we understand that that's actually how they then vote? Like, do we get that really in our core, that like the ways in which we've institutionalized racism is so deep into the roots of America that like Trump isn't just promising to blow things up. He's also promising to recreate a racial hierarchy,
of course,
that fails them, but fails them less than it fails people of color. And that's a trade-off that too many people are willing to make. I would argue because we don't actually just talk about it. Like, I don't think that people are inherently destined to make that trade-off. I think the abandonment of delivering for regular people, so people don't believe democracy works, and then never talking about that open. Like, I think you actually need to say to people, racism is persisting because people want to steal from you, and it works better then. Like, you just need to say that to people. It's okay to say race out loud, and to say that racism is happening, and to say that Republicans are racist, because they are. That's their policies. The inability to just say out in the open enables all of this to continue, and enables rich people to continue to rip people off. And then you get this thing where it's like the frustration, all that stuff comes into play with all these things.
I would also just throw in a little bit about unions. I knew the late great Jane McAlevey and read a bunch of her books and spoke to her and worked with her on some things. And she talked about how unions, once they began openly talking about how the bosses would purposefully pit different races against each other, absolutely purposefully, like that conversation, opening up that conversation and talking about it openly really helped those unions to move forward and to be able to, finally get big wins against the bosses.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. I'm totally inspired by her too. I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. It's not scary. It's okay to just say that out loud to people, because people need to hear it. They need to know that, because it also signals to regular people that you actually understand what's happening in America, that you're not going to bullshit them, and that you're willing to fight. And those are really good signals to people. Like, if you just pretend that what you don't see isn't happening, people are just like, well, then it's all shit.
Anna, go, and then I'll go.
Oh, I was just going to take us to the next point, because I think this really leads us to the failing of the Democratic leadership, because they are unwilling. Like, the way to talk about race in a union is to say the reality of the fact that the bosses are pitting the different races against each other, and that is real. And if you're unwilling to mention that there are bosses, if you cannot say that there are bosses, then how can you get that message across? And like when you are unwilling to ever say anything that might make the donor class uncomfortable, then how can you ever make the case that this kind of, pushing like what Trump is doing to get people to hate each other and to get people to like want to push the next person underwater just so they can stand on their head, then you'll never be able to succeed, and they won't feel like you're going to fight for them, because who are they fighting, right? So that I think go ahead, Jonathan. But
No,
talk about just going to say like I want to talk next about like the Democratic Party and its leadership and how they are failing us in that
No,
sense.
like what's perfect is that you're saying that was exactly what I was about to comment on, is the way in which so much of the problem in a lot of democratic politics is having a villainless politics.
Yes.
Where that things are happening and they're caused by nobody. And so if all these problems are caused by nobody, like people will not typically believe that you're fighting for them if you're not talking about whom you're fighting against. And so like you obviously need to be careful on picking your villains, but if you're not fighting against anybody, they don't think that you're actually fighting or fighting for them. Because like that's how we understand things. And I think that there's a way, something that I was like musing on recently is I think that there's a tendency among certain Democrats to try to take the fact that there's like amongst a lot of liberals, there's a like philosophical attraction to a philosophical belief in positive sum social relations. And the idea of positive sum social relations, of the different like win-win arrangements, is an important thing to believe in. But that doesn't mean that every single thing in the economy is a positive sum relation, as opposed to there being like clear examples of somebody exploiting somebody else. And if you can't, and like there's a way of trying to just like use the language of positive sum win-win to hide the fact that you also want to be, you want to keep some of the people doing the exploiting in your coalition.
So I'm going to talk about the bill to talk about Democrats. So the Republicans are just flat out like they're just like straight into 1930s mountain jokes. Like
I think we forgot to say what the heck is in the bill, right?
Yeah, so let me talk about that. Yeah, so let's talk about this bill, because I think it's really important that people get like how bad this bill is and how the devastation it's going to wreck. So like the Medicaid, so people don't quite understand, but it's like they call it Medicaid cuts or people are going to lose their insurance, but really it's just paperwork. They're going to paperwork people. It's a full-time job to be poor in America. And it's a full-time job to be poor in America because of Republicans and the fact that they're evil. And they do evil stuff like this, like not allowing people who deserve healthcare to live, who need food to live. The whole thing is to make it so that they can't access those things. And that's how they quote unquote save money, is people who should get access so they can live, won't get access, so they'll die. That's the policy. That's how they quote unquote save money. That's the quote unquote cuts, is death by paperwork, administrative burden. And so there is tax on Social Security, which they said they want to do. There are cuts to Medicaid. There are also cuts to Medicare, and people don't understand that piece. Pharmaceuticals now get huge exemptions for Medicare about so the prices will go up for you, the regular person. The cost of drugs will go up, and the amount of money that Medicare has is not going up. So that's a cut, because you are giving the things that were going to care for you are now going to corporations. So that's a huge win again. So you have cuts to Medicare, you have cuts to Medicaid, you have taxation of Social Security, and then you have massive death by paperwork to poor people trying to get food, which is also a huge cut to rural farmers who pay into those processes. That's why it's into the Department of Agriculture, that all these things, because that's who pays for those things. USAID, where do they buy their food? American farmers. That's a huge cut to those people. And then the money is, like everybody's talking about, is to hospitals, especially rural hospitals, especially in red parts of America, are all going to close because they can't afford it, because you have Medicare and Medicaid cuts. So people are going to have less money, so they're not going to get care. So you're just going to cut all of those things. They cut cancer research in half. Cancer research. We have had amazing breakthroughs in cancer and vaccines, and they have both banned us from using vaccines, and now they're also cutting the amount of money to those institutions. You're getting cuts to everything that if you care about science, if you care about fighting cancer, if you care about feeding poor people, if you care about making sure that the world doesn't die, if you just care about the world being somewhat calm so that we can so that we don't all go into World War II because they're not I don't know, some sort of system is existing. Like, all of those things got cut in this bill. The things that increase their concentration camps, money for concentration camps, money for unaccountable. Literally, you cannot hold them accountable according to this bill. ICE agents, right? Like, we're spending more on that than anything in history. It's just like that to me is, and then you have the fact that you have the failing pieces of democracy to hold any of this accountable. That to me is the soup of a failing democracy. You have large camps on people who are literally only police force that's literally only available to the president, and you have destitution of people's economic futures.
Let me just add in terms of other damages from the bills and the way in which they take an axe to a lot of clean energy spending. Thus, both that's damaging both to the chance of ever possibly meeting goals for climate mitigation, but also just economically very damaging to places where you have seen the ability, because of a lot of the kind of transition of renewable energy bringing in a lot of jobs for places, and that just goes if if you take that away, as well as just various ways of propping up the coal industry too, which is just dying on its own, that Republicans want to keep alive, even when other energy industries offer far more. And the thing I would also just tag in on, that's what's been particularly scary to me with a lot of the new investment in detention capacity. I thought this was well said in a piece by Bolt's magazine recently, is about how whenever a new prison gets built, that prison creates a whole economy around it, making it much more difficult to ever take it down, because that prison means jobs for various people, and politicians hate your jobs. And the two things that just always tend to be the case in politics is any increase to police and prisons is always very difficult to undo, and any cut to taxes is very difficult to undo, because of the way it establishes the new baseline, and because of levels of cowardice amongst Democratic politicians and actually challenging sometimes flat out wrong information people have in their minds about those, or actually just addressing things structurally.
So I want to jump in because I love how you're talking about the Democrats, having a reluctance to challenge. And I want to talk about, Chuck Schumer's basic approach has been, we're going to do nothing. We're going to not bother to try and stop him at all. He made sure that their budget passed. Just let the Republicans do horrible, horrible things to the American people, and keep letting that happen until Trump's poll numbers go down enough. And then Democrats will win. And what he hasn't realized is that the Democrats' poll numbers, because they're doing nothing to protect us, the Democratic elite poll numbers are going down even farther than Trump's. And what's amazing, and if one of you wants to pull up some numbers here, is the poll numbers among Democratic voters of their own leadership are just abysmal. And I've never seen it like this. It's truly remarkable. Jordan, you got some numbers for us?
Yeah, so just I don't have it. I'll try to pull it up for what Democrats think of Democrats, but just generally speaking, across the board, Democrat people's favorability of the Democratic Party is somewhere between 32 and 43 in the last month or so, or the last 2 months. So you have 43, 32, 43, 37, but the negatives are 57, 63, 53, 59. Those are high negatives for somebody who's trying to win an election. And the only thing I guess that they have as a solace is that the Republicans are slightly higher with 62% disapproval, but that's not, they're like, you don't want to be in there, if the goal is to like try to win out, it's not great to have like, Republicans and Democrats in the similar terrible place. So so it's just it's people want people are going to fight for that, and it's just ridiculous. I'll just say there's a playbook that Democrats could do that, like, to learn the other way. Like, you could actually make Medicare real. Like, you could stop. Bush cut Medicare. He just pushed it off to after he was in office. But there was a huge he created that he created. You could fill it with a robust Medicare. You could raise the tax exemption on Social Security and then raise the amount of money that people on Social Security get. It should be twice, 3 times as much as it is. You could do that as a policy. That's a good policy for Democrats to run. More Medicare, more Medicaid, more Social Security. You could run on it was really popular when Biden said we're going to have a space race for cancer. Like, people love the idea that we're spending money on cancer research. That it was popular. That when Biden did that, that was popular. You can do that again, right? Those subsidies for the Biden Build Back Better bill was a super popular bill, and it got more popular as people realized it was creating jobs for them and their communities. Those are all things that Democrats could do, and do loudly and more clearly. And to me, the answer is it's not. Yes, it's making stuff affordable, but things aren't unaffordable just by chance. They're unaffordable because corporations are finding new ways to rip people off in every possible way, right? Everything from, I saw like Hotels.com and Expedia charges people who are searching for for hotels in San Francisco more than if they're in a poor part of the country, to pricing, like literally raising prices at supermarkets if you're looking at food, right? Like, all of these things are ways in which corporations are just consistently trying to rip people off. And if you say to people, no, we're going to fight that, we're going to stop that, we're going to invest in you and tax those people, that's really easy things to do. Like, yes, the media will be upset. The New York Times will write about it. Ezra Klein will be on his podcast telling you what bad policy that actually is. Like, yes, all the people who you think are your friends, who aren't actually your friends, are going to tell you it's bad policy. But you know who's going to reward you? Voters.
Yes. Well, and guess what? You're talking about a playbook. Like, just live in New York City.
Yeah.
Right. And I will say, like, to end on a positive note, I think when we're talking about the state of democracy, I actually think that the low rating for the Democratic elite politicians is a positive step in the right direction, because I think we have to get Democratic voters to stop just being willing to do whatever the Democratic elites ask them to do, when it's generally tends to be whatever their donors want them to do. And so once it takes the voters have to be unhappy enough with that style of leadership to be able to vote for someone like Zohran. And I think someone like Zohran actually providing for working class people in an economic way, putting money in their pockets and making their lives better, that is how we get out of this and how we fix the state of democracy as well. Other notes before, because I know we're running a little late, other notes on like democracy and
I could go on, but that's a lovely note to end on.
I agree completely. I'll just say really quickly, sorry, I was trying to find what Democrats think of Democrats. Their own party's favorability, only 66% of Democrats say their party's representatives favorable, with 27% saying that they're unfavorable. So the base is moving. I'll just say really quickly, to me, the problem is also the media. People need to get that a lot of the corporate, rich people own the Boston Globe. Rich investors own, New York Times is a billion-dollar investment, publicly traded company with loads and loads of money and selling you things, selling you goods, selling you games, and occasionally good, really terrible journalism to get you outrage clicks, and then very, very, very occasionally some good reporting from some good journalists, occasional, right? So these are the people framing, I think for those of us who care a lot who are probably listening to this, we need to get that these are the people framing it for Democrats. Like, because no one else is, conservatives are not engaging with legacy media. They are off in La La Land in their own place. The people control, the Matt Iglesiases, the Ezra Kleins, the men. These are all the people telling Democrats what to think. And we need to understand that. And we need to be encouraging, again, people to engage with, more local media, more independent media, put your money in those things, stop putting your money into big conglomerates. Support those places, lift them up, retweet them. If you have an opportunity,
Jordan, do our plug.
Well, yeah, if you have an opportunity, promote other types of media. Don't just promote that. Like, every time somebody reposts a New York Times article, like a little of me dies. Just like, please stop helping them. They don't need it. Like, help other independent media. And if you, now that they're saying it, if you have a chance, please do support us. Like, again, the three of us do not take any money, but there are really wonderful people who we hire to help do this work. So please consider giving to them. They're fantastic. They do really great work. We really appreciate all the people behind the scenes who make this possible. Somebody asked me, like, how do you guys do this podcast? And I was like, here's the secret. We hire people to do a lot of the stuff that's really difficult, and we pay them. And so we can only do that because you donate. And please repost us. Please, we only grow if you help us grow. Like, there's only so many times that people will listen to me talk about it. Like, they need you to talk about it. If you're listening, like, tell somebody new. Encourage somebody who's complaining online. Like, actually, I learned this thing. If you see somebody complaining about Maura Healey or about the fact that our legislature isn't transparent or isn't doing the right thing, like, tell them, hey, there's somebody who explains this. You should go to that podcast. Like, please do share us as well. Like, that's also fun.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jordan. Thanks so much, Jonathan. And thanks so much to our listeners and our donors and our lovely team that does all the behind the scenes work. Hope you've enjoyed this. Forward it to your friends, and we look forward to talking to you all next week. And happy 4th of July.
Hey there. Thanks so much for watching us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. And it would be amazing if you would also subscribe to us on your favorite podcast player. Just look for Incorruptible Massachusetts wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much.